Bucket Podcast with your hosts, Krystle Matar and Michael R Fletcher. Now sit back and prepare to be entertained. Welcome to the Bucket
Welcome to the Dripping Bucket Podcast, the podcast named after a bucket with a hole in it, with your hosts, Krystle Matar and myself, Michael R Fletcher. Today, we are joined by, and I always mean to ask people, double check how to pronounce their names.
We're recording?
Daniel Coolbaugh. And
that was perfect.
Fuck yeah, I totally got that. As fantasy author and podcaster, interviewer extraordinaire. Thank you for joining us, Daniel. Can we call you Dan or no?
Dan is totally fine. I would prefer it, actually.
Okay. Feels less formal
doing,
than
man?
Daniel.
Yeah, I'm great. Like I said, before we got recording, I got some great feedback from Logan D. Irons, on my first novella. I've been working really hard on, trying to get it, up to snuff. And I had a couple of friends that are like, oh, he was kind of like, 65% of it was like perfect. And my friend today goes, don't you want it to be like 80? I was like, dude, this is my first like published thing. I said, I have several other novels that are still, in the works and, need work and stuff. I said, it's just like tempering, like a piece of steel. I said, I think 65 was way better. I thought it was kind of at 40. So, but it was nice, you know how it is, it was nice to kind of get the ball rolling, if you will. And just kind of, it got me really excited, because he said I read it in one sitting and I think there's something really here and, just needs a little work. Yeah. So I'm looking for, the rest of my alpha reader team, to kind of go from there. So this week and next week, pretty much everybody will get back to me. So it's, how it is. It just feels good to get stuff going. So
a month from now,
Yeah.
responses will start trickling in.
Yeah. It's hurry up and wait at this point.
Exactly.
But it's also, it must be really exciting, like getting that first round back and it being like, this is better than I thought. Usually, for me, it's the opposite where it's like, shit, I thought I was further along in this process than this. I guess I still have a lot of work to do. So what's your secret, I guess?
I mean, I've been working on the same 25K for, almost a year and a half now, I feel like.
That'll do it.
Yeah. Well, I do have to say though, and I think people forget, like they think that even though you're publishing or editing or whatever, I think, Mike, I think you and I talked about this on our second episode recently, where it's like, it's just going to be crap still, like until you get, to a certain point. And like Logan was saying, he goes, I still think I'm like novel, whatever he's written, like 14 or whatever and published. So he's like, I still feel that way. So, I totally expect, that's what I was saying to my friend today. I totally expected, I just need feedback. And that's, I think, is different is, people are trying to give me feedback and, the past year and stuff. And I actually really enjoy feedback and I have a pretty thick skin. So I don't know if it's the teacher in me or, right.
No,
I'm like, just tell me what to do,
I think it's a very specific personality. And I find I do gravitate towards the people that are of the same mind where it's like, don't worry about my feelings. Just tell me what needs to be fixed so I can do it. Like I am so ready to roll up my sleeves and gut this thing and make it good because all I want is for it to be good. I don't need like my ego's fine. It's. I left that behind years ago. I drank it away. and then
fair.
So then when you have like a list of what's working and what's not working, and you get to like see it as a project in that first feedback loop, it's like, okay, this is real, this is a thing that I can finish now, and that's a really good feeling.
When I wasn't surprised, I mean, there were a couple suggestions he made where I was like, he's like, you don't have to take them, just I'm throwing stuff out there. I said no. I said those are golden. I was like, I'm gonna put you in the acknowledgments or whatever, I was like, I'll give you credit. And not everybody gets a, I said I was like, I really appreciate you helping me. And that was like, like H.L. Tinsley too. I'm like, thank you so much, like for even remotely saying, I'll read it, because I know how it is, you're busy and stuff.
You're taking a chance.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know, it was just cool, to like, I just, there were certain things where I was like, I know people are going to say this about, because I was worried. I'm really trying to run that line between like military thriller at the beginning and then turn it into urban
Flip it over
fantasy,
to
but
fantasy.
still, kind of flip that around. But I was too worried it was too military thriller, and then not enough urban fantasy. And now the feedback I've gotten from a few people now, the first couple chapters, they're like, "Oh, I want more Marine stuff." I'm like, "Okay, cool," because my
Cool.
Monster Hunter, he's not a Monster Hunter yet, but he's a recon Marine starting out in
Yeah.
the prequel novellas, for the first one, and then it's all about his interaction in the first prequel novella, The Hunted, and it's all about his interaction with the supernatural and how his life gets thrust into chaos essentially, and how he has to deal with it. And it's really like I'm trying to do 3 at a time for the novellas, and then the first book will be like set 2 years after that, essentially, where he's already like doing stuff. So it gives me, I think, a wide range of just cool stories, to kind of go with, and bring in cool characters and kind of see if people like them, and I don't expect, like, somebody said something to me, I was like, I don't expect to sell thousands of copies. I said it's a reader magnet that I just want to practice, pulling out, with if it's a full novel. I think everybody that's done that, I just was on with Tatiana Obey again the other day, like 2 days ago, for our second interview for my podcast, and I talked about Sister Samurai with her, and what she felt went really well, and she talked with Herman Stewarding about this too on their podcast, and I just thought her and Logan made a lot of sense when I talked to them about, like, you want to treat your novella, if you want it to be successful, treat it like it's a real, like a real book. Because I see some people, they kind of slip them in, and I'm like, I'm a novella guy, so I'll buy any novella. So, like, if you and Mike are like, oh, I got a novella, I'm like, bought. I won't even look at the blurb. I don't care. I'll just buy it. So I've read your guys' stuff. I'm like, I'll read it. So
I found lately I've picked up like quite a few novellas, and it's not just because they're short. I feel like, or because they're short, it's a separate skill of like being able to tell a really poignant story in that short. Like you said, 25K, is that right? Like, that's just a little tease, but for it to be a full story, like, that is a really specific skill, and I admire it. And also I'm like studying it, like, okay, this is something I need to learn clearly, because
the novella is,
I
mean, for me, maybe not for everybody, but it's just as much work as a novel.
It is.
Oh, kind of a little bit harder in some ways. And I can't sell it for as much. So Dan, why the fuck are you writing novellas?
So first of all, I have to say, Ness Brown, The Scores Between the Stars. Oh my God, blew my mind, right? It was at the library. I love the cover. It had like an alien vibe to it. And I love that. And I was like, holy crap, like, that looks amazing. And when I read it, it was after I had already sent my first edits off for my novella, and I felt like I was on the right track. So one, Nathaniel's the main character. His name is Nathaniel Wither, and like I said, he's an ex-recon Marine. He would just not stop talking to me. I'm like trying to, like literally, like, I had the idea for him, and I was like, ooh, a monster hunter. I was like, I want something different. Like, no offense, I don't want a cop, a private eye. I want something different, or a druid, or whatever, sorceress. I was like, I want something different. I want something, with somebody that has a similar set of morals with me, but also like will do the hard things, because to fight, real monsters, I feel like you have to have some monster within you as well. And I don't know, I wanted to explore a couple of those things. So he just would not stop talking to me about his beginning. And I'm like, okay, but when I started to do that as one book, I'm like, this is not one book. I'm like, these are novellas. And I had a kid. He was planned. He was planned, trust me. Yeah, but like, like other stuff happened. Like, we had financial issues and stuff. You know how it is being an indie author. It's like, well, I'm going to have to, we had a heater and AC blow. So that was like a lot. So all of a sudden, all of my money for my bigger books, my fantasy ones, kind of went down the drain. And I was like, well, I have these ideas for these prequel novellas. And I just thought it'd be really cool to set up and explore for myself more about why he does what he, is doing in the main series. And I just had this amazing idea, and I was like, oh, I can't get over this. And then it was more of like a 3-act thing. So the first 3 novellas for the prequels, and I'll probably do more too, just because they're really fun, and I got a lot of ideas. But it was just interesting because I was able to set a story arc of 1, 2, 3 very easily, and setting them up as novellas, I'm like, well, I can give them away as reader magnets, at least the first one, if not all 3, if people sign up for the newsletter. I'm actually planning already on doing a Kickstarter with an awesome cover. Next winter, I'm going to put them all together into one anthology. But it just broke up into these 3 stories, and he's like, I want to tell this story. And I'm like, well, that's really inconvenient because I'm trying to write you in a whole book. But once I just kind of listened to him, it just kind of came into fruition. And I don't know, I'm a big novella person. And like H.L. Tinsley, she was like, hey, I love novellas. I don't have time to read full novels. And I've seen they're on the rise. Like I said, I don't expect to make a bunch. I just was trying to get something out there this year, and I was able to cut costs, not on like editing and stuff, but on other things, where it really made it feasible to do all 3 novellas. And it was honestly so far has been cheaper than doing one full book. So it kind of gives me time to then prep the character. And I was also worried about not being patient, because I could have just put something out, and man, am I glad I didn't do that, because the feedback I got was great, but also, like you were saying earlier, Krystle, like I want it to be the best, and I need the feedback. So I just gave myself a lot of berth to do that. So I'll be releasing this first one, The Hunted, out Labor Day weekend this year, and then 2 months after that, November, I have the second one, The Hunters, and then the third one is going to be January 2025, and that'll be The Night Stalkers. So you're literally getting to see him from start to finish. So he doesn't have any powers or anything at the start of this first one. It's literally his journey of how he gets with his monster hunting clan and how he gets his powers and basically gets his mission. So
I laugh a lot about you talking about him talking to you and not leaving you alone, but the only reason I laugh is because I can relate. So like just that character that you cannot stop thinking about, and that person that lives in your head that will like ruin your life just so that they can get some time on the page. But I think it's a really interesting way to launch into this career, especially as we exist in a space where other authors are so willing to talk about how to do this stuff. Like you can talk to all these big people about what to do, but there's only so much they can teach you. Eventually you just have to publish something and learn things yourself. Yep. And I think with this novellas, that's a really smart way to, like, if you wait till the perfect time to publish something, you'll never publish. But at the same time, you have to be aware of your limitations, and if the time is not right for that full book, I think it's really smart to just go for it with the idea that you do have time for, and I think that's going to be really cool to watch that land and explode all over the scene.
Oddly organized for a writer.
It's really weird for us.
A little creepy. I'm not sure we like that.
Mike, every time I have him on, he goes, "Don't send me anything. Just give me the link 5 minutes before." I'm like, okay. Like I treat people like they're a Hollywood guest. I'm like, you want grapes? Like whatever, you want me to take the skin off? Like that's fine. I started calling it the Fletcher method, and a couple people recently asked me. They're like, do you want questions? They're like, no, I just want to do it. And I go, the Fletcher method. They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. And it's funny because people don't even question it, and they're just like, oh yeah, that sounds like Mike, and they're like, yeah, he just wants to roll with it. I'm like, yeah, that's where the creative juices are, and I said to him, I was like, that's how we get, got good interviews and stuff. So for me though, like in terms of, I don't know, it's just hard for me as a teacher because I only have certain times too where my schedule's open. So like this summer, like right now, I also have I've been waiting on, more feedback and edits and stuff, developmental edits. So I have been working on a dark fantasy. I have like 5 crazy outlines. I have like,
are they all for the same character and the same world,
same universe? Same universe. I got a bunch of like book 1s and stuff started for different ones. There were some things I started and I was like, I'm just not at the right level for this. I have the dark fantasy in my own fantasy world that I spent the last God, I guess I'm 36 now. So 22 years building and developing, and it's just not ready. So I decided that I need to figure out ways to level up. And I thought, well, if I,
Publishing will
you only
level
get,
you up.
I just thought doing the novellas, I'll also, I'm risking certain things, but I'm not risking as much as, putting out one book and then trying to put out a book 2. So, I can get a readership, followers, newsletters and everything, signups and stuff, hopefully. And, build, everybody wants to build right off the bat, but, on my podcast, I've learned that it's a slow trend, but if you can be seen more often. So I thought 3, novellas all kind of, really just being together, just not random. Like you're going to get all 3 parts of the story, but each is its own story. Like you could come in, read novella 1 and be like, dang, that just happened. And it happens. Like it happens. And then the second novella, you're just like, holy crap, stuff happened again. And you're starting to understand by the time you get to book 1, like next March, how
exactly who he is.
Like exactly who he is, why he does what he does. And you'll get the magic system along the way. For his like Monster Hunting Guild, you'll get the world built up for you ahead of time. Some of it, it's very, very deep. Herman and I were talking about this on our crossover episode with our podcast. I have like Avengers style like crew where I have other series too, where I have like a Valkyrie. So I have books planned for her, and they'll cross over with each other. I love when different people do that. I have a vampire huntress who comes from an ancient Aztec line of vampire hunters. Who it was a TikTok, like a random TikTok, and I hate TikTok because they always give me the best ideas of like alternate history or mysteries. Well, because this guy literally went on there and he said, oh, what if the Aztec Empire, the reason that they had so many sacrifices because they were ran by vampires? And I'm like, well, that's stupid because now I have to write it into my urban fantasy world. I'm like, God, that sucks. So like I've put all these different things together and layered it where you're just gonna get really, if you like urban fantasy, you're gonna get the tropes, but I also like certain things in terms of urban fantasy. Kevin Hearn's a really big I love him. Like I met him actually. He was just such a cool guy. I've messaged him a lot. Like he's just been awesome over the years where I've had questions and stuff on research, like whatever. But I really I love the Iron Druid Chronicles. I just love his writing, and I'd like to do something similar to that. So there's a lot there. I have other characters, so there'll be like 4 main characters in the same universe. I have another series that I like about halfway through with book 1. It's called Ogres and Overlords, and you actually get some of the monsters from this other realm, and those are all where all the legends and stuff come from.
And stuff?
Yeah, for like the Fae, giants, trolls, and stuff. And they can shapeshift. The ogres can. They're like the elite guards. They get left here in ancient times, and it's ironic because Nathaniel's monster guild or clan is that old. They're like 75,000 years old. Like last ice age, and they end up with other groups stopping these overlords, these like sorceress beings who control these like ogres and giants and these other people from this other dimension, essentially this other world. And then they get stuck here. So that's going to be one. There's other types of creatures too, and I don't want to give it away, but Nathaniel encounters one of them as a Marine in The Hunted, and he's a recon Marine. He's used to being and he has this interaction, and his hand gets forced, I would say, totally, and fate intervenes, and he has a lot of stuff happen, and it's going to set him directly off, and he's going to have to figure out his life and kind of how this expansion,
and
that Constantine look
of his life.
Totally. This is the best way to put it.
I dig it.
You've mentioned several projects on the go. How many books are you actually like in the middle of writing right now? Novellas included.
So I have this thing where I don't get writer's block, but sometimes characters will just be like, I'm busy, like I don't want to talk to you. And instead of just waiting or trying to force it, I'll just go for a couple days, like 2 or 3 days. I'll take a break. And especially with my son, the last several years, I'm just like, Les Brown talks about Robert Schuller. It's a great quote. It says, by the yard it's hard, but inch by inch everything is a cinch. And I just figure as long as I'm progressing and getting words down and outlines down, like like NaNoWriMo, I had 3 outlines that are 15,000 words almost a piece. And all I got to do is fill them out this summer and next year. But all the ideas are there. Just got to get the rough drafts down and stuff. Other ones I got 7, I think. So
1 year, you're going to drop like 7 books.
Yeah. It's
Herman teases me. He's like...
It's definitely a good example of like ass and chair theory, where it's like, if you've got time, you've got to be working. Like, if you're serious about making this happen, if you've got 20 minutes, figure out how many words you can do and just do them. And eventually that means you've got this catalog of an incredible array of stories. I just wanted to bounce off before I forget. You mentioned that you'd been working on one of them for 22 years. So I take it, you know, like us, you've been hoping for this for a while. And does that also tie into the same universe? Where
no, that's all my just like those are just like dark fantasy, I would say, like high fantasy. It's just all in the same world. My first one's called The Thief's Ambition. It's a trilogy. It's book 1. These 2 best friends are in they're trying to get into a thieves guild. And much like Rob's like city, or Brian McCullen's, like the city itself has like its own thing. And if you don't join a guild, you're going to be killed. So they have one opportunity. They have to steal like a magic blade from the king's and sorcerer's armory in the middle of the city, and they only have 5 days to do it. It's a total heist. There's just certain things that I've written it twice. There's certain things that I want to do that I actually changed where the entire world was set in my world, or where the story is set in my world. I was in a Middle Eastern kind of setting because I love desert settings. I'm a D&D guy, and I had to move it to like an Eastern European type setting because it just wasn't working with the mythology and stuff. So once I moved it, all of a sudden the characters changed. So I've literally been redoing everything, and all of a sudden the pieces start to fit. But I still need a little bit of time to figure out a couple of those pieces. But I have
some skills.
Yeah, I have like 7 books, I think, that are at 25,000 to 35,000 set in that world. So I just have to kind of finish them up. I know Mike's laughing at me, but this has been like 10 years. I met Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rutherford, like,
because we're so goddamn jealous.
Well, I went to a conference, or a book signing, right? I went to a conference like, hey, there's this book signing right before I was leaving Scottsdale, Arizona. I was living in Phoenix. And my wife already had moved here to New York, so I was following her. Like 4 days later, I had class. So, like a grad school thing. So I was like, I'm going to go. She goes, you should go. So Kevin Hearn puts up all these people. Brandon had just came out with Way of Kings. Patrick had just came out with In the Name of the Wind. Brian McCullen's first Gunpowder Mage series. I was there. He was there. He was awesome. And they're like, I met Michael J. Sullivan. There was just so many traditional. Pierce Brown. Met Pierce Brown right when Red Rising was just released, like 2-3 weeks. I got signed books from all these people. There was so many authors, and I spent all day there. And I was for sure I was going to be traditionally published. Yeah, right. I went back 3 times, and then they're like, I'm going through, and all the indie people were just having such a good time with one another, and seriously, like they were just having a blast. They were shooting the breeze, they were making fun of each other. And I was talking to them, and a couple of them, and they're like Brian's like, well, you might want to do indie. And I'm like, what's indie? And ever since then, I was like, well, this definitely is something I want to do. So I've been wanting to do hybrid before hybrid was a thing. But Brandon had said something to Brian about that like 10 years ago. And he had the thought for it. And like, I remember because I talked to Brian McCullen about it, and I'm sure they don't remember, but I do. And that influenced me quite a bit. So ever since then, I've just been writing and writing and writing. And once I figure out how to finish something, it just that my fantasy story wasn't ready. So, and now I have like 3 other somethings.
Felt that one.
There's
right here.
to finish.
Took a while. It took like at least 10 years. So. Really 22, but yeah.
So we're hitting a 24-minute mark. This is a perfect spot to wrap up this episode. Dan will join us again next week, or whenever the
2
fuck we
months from
actually
now
release
or whatever.
episodes.
Yeah.
Who
No, wait,
knows?
it's a couple of
Some
days
point.
apart. Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
All
thank
right,
you for
thanks
coming
for
by.
joining us.
Yeah. All right.